It manifests differently in everyone. This TikTok I have a problem with, I'm sorry. It's been brought to my attention that this girl does have dissociation disorder, and that's not my point here. The difference between dissociation and daydreaming is that normal, non-maladaptive daydreaming is a completely normal form of dissociation that most people go through. Dissociation beyond that can be maladaptive daydreaming, and dissociation—
No, I'm gonna sit here and do her job for you because she never did it before. I'm gonna sit here and explain it to you in my 15-minute video. This complex disorder that takes several hours to go through all the details of. I'm gonna do the job, okay? Because I know best.
Disorder, which can feel like someone is physically removed from their body or the place
You already
they are
said
in.
that.
All of the above can be coping mechanisms. That's all they have in common.
And maybe making light of some of these issues could be a coping mechanism, you asshole.
It manifests itself in many different ways depending on who you are, and that's all the more reason to stop listening to these TikToks to diagnose you.
You don't need to listen to TikTok to diagnose you, but the TikToks can help you understand things. Has anyone ever heard the saying, take it with a grain of salt, for God's sake? She acts like her viewers don't know about that. Like, don't tell people not to look at these videos for help. How the fuck are you going to say at the beginning of your video?
Mental health TikToks may have the guise of being innocent and just sharing people's stories, experiences, normalizing mental health talk, and genuinely helping. And I'm sure a lot of it is that, and that's amazing and helpful.
I understand that these can be helpful, but now you just said not to look at it for help.
Hyperfocusing. It manifests itself in many different ways depending on who you are, and that's all the more reason to stop listening to these TikToks to diagnose you.
So then you take back everything you said originally then?
I want to talk about dissociating now, especially because this is a topic that kind of pushed me over the edge to make this video.
Okay.
Google says that dissociation is dissociation and lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. If you've ever dissociated before, it's fucking terrifying. It's awful. You don't feel alive. It's like you're watching yourself in third person. You don't feel like you're really there. When you speak, it's just so like, it's an out-of-body experience, and it's super weird. And it's caused by many different things. It can be a
And it's different for everybody.
mechanism. It can be caused by trauma, but not all the time. It can be caused by anxiety. And in my case, I've only had a handful of dissociation episodes, which is different than dissociation disorder. And I've experienced this a handful of times in college. And
I guess I'd say one of the worst reasons to make a video on these things is when it personally affects you and that's your only reason. Because then you're going to go through it from the lens of how it's affecting you, which is just you having to wade through an ocean of bias, you know? It's hard. You should try. The reason why you see me say in my videos a lot, they, them, and stuff, even when I'm talking about an issue that surrounds women, I am a woman, but I'll still say they because I try to look at stuff from an outside perspective. If I want to talk about a topic, most of the time I try to ask myself, okay, so how is this affecting everyone? Let me take myself out of the equation. But most people I realize just don't do that. They're always like, well, how's this affecting me so I can, defend myself?
in my personal case, it was likely caused by severe anxiety. What I've seen on TikTok about symptoms of dissociation is just gross. It makes it seem like if you've ever daydreamed before, you have dissociation disorder.
Could you be dissociating? I'm a licensed therapist and we're going to talk about it. This has been a topic a lot of you have requested, so be sure to hit that follow right now to follow the series.
Just so you know, she said to follow the series because on TikTok, people post several TikToks back to back to back to cover a subject. So she's just dead wrong when she says you can't sum it up in a 60-second video or 30-second video or whatever.
Be sure to hit that follow right now to follow the series. Dissociation is a way that people can cope. Think of dissociation as an instinctual response to an overwhelming stressor. Typically that's trauma, but that is not always the case. Dissociation can feel different for every single person. I'm going to say it again. Dissociation can feel different for every single person. A dissociation episode might feel like memory loss, detached from yourself, your body, your emotions, or your world, and life feeling foggy. It's important to note there's a difference between dissociation disorder and dissociation episodes. If it's a symptom, it typically comes up in anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, and PTSD or CPTSD. And sometimes therapists miss this. So when you're in session, bring that episode to light.
So that was a licensed therapist that was talking about it. And I don't feel like I have to reiterate what she said, but I really liked her point about that.
So I'm going to use a licensed professional on TikTok to talk about why discussing mental health on TikTok is so bad. Huh? Like you're just proving that there's more legit stuff on TikTok than you're saying there is.
It manifests differently in everyone. This TikTok I have a problem with, I'm sorry. It's been brought to my attention that this girl does have dissociation disorder, and that's not my point here.
Yeah, it does, because that means you thought she was faking it. You thought she was faking it, they told you she has it, and you're like, I'm gonna make my point anyway. I'm gonna make my point, instead of realizing that your perspective is flawed. That was your red flag to stop and think, to realize that you were emotionally reacting and you couldn't even see it.
Whether she does or not is none of my business. It's personal. It would be really ignorant and stupid of me to sit here and say that someone else is faking something for attention.
No one brought up faking except for you, because it was on your mind. So you just told on yourself. Again, you thought she was faking it. This is why you shouldn't be talking about this. Like, this is so irresponsible.
It's been brought to my attention that this girl does have dissociation disorder, and that's not my point here. Whether she does or not is none of my business. It's personal. It would be really ignorant and stupid of me to sit here and say that someone else is faking something for attention. But my problem with this is that what a younger person might see is, oh, this person's daydreaming. They have dissociative disorder. Do I have that? I daydream a lot. Someone may look at...
I swear on my life, like, my problem with these people is that they make jokes out of shit they should take seriously, and they take shit seriously out of stuff that they should take as a joke. They're backwards, man. What is wrong with someone who's suffering from DID trying to make memes or jokes around something that they're struggling with? This is someone who has suffered from this their entire life. And now they're trying to now find the fun in it. Some of these people have been to therapy, extensive therapy, to understand themselves. And they're trying to get to a place where they can have fun with it, because that's a part of therapy in a lot of cases, so that you don't feel so burdened by this thing. And when she tries to do it, you're like, well, you're not taking it seriously. She has so many videos where she talks about the seriousness of it. The one time she puts up something funny, or the few times she does, you have a problem with it. You didn't do your research, and you're gonna blame her for why other people are misinformed when they should be doing their research. Why don't you just promote, do your fucking research? Because between this person, that one fucking guy who just couldn't take anything seriously for 5 seconds aside from his own fucking OCD, all these people, that fucking Gen Zer, every single one of them were just shit talking while reacting to stuff. I didn't see them look up anything. I didn't see them list any statistics, any research on anything, any historical evidence of these people, a timeline, a compilation, so we can see a repeated behavior. I myself have seen DissociaDID's channel, because that's the name of her channel, and she's talked about this subject so seriously, so much, that to see you shit on a little quick TikTok joke that she makes is a disservice to everything that she's worked towards, as you're trying to project that exact toxic behavior onto her. You are the problem.
that and understand that if you daydream or zone out a lot, that they might have dissociative disorder when you don't. It's so much more than that, and it's so much more nuanced than that.
Which she has fucking talked about as someone who has DID. What are you explaining to her that she doesn't already know? And you're just taking a whole shit on it. Something that you don't even know what it took for her to get to that point. Could have taken years to get to a point where they felt comfortable enough to agree on something like that. You don't fucking know. It's ridiculous.
The difference between dissociation and daydreaming is that normal, non-maladaptive daydreaming is a completely normal form of dissociation that most people go through. Dissociation beyond that can be maladaptive daydreaming, and dissociation—
Now I'm gonna sit here and do her job for you because she never did it before. I'm gonna sit here and explain it to you in my 15-minute video, this complex disorder that takes several hours to go through all the details of. I'm gonna do the job, okay, because I know best.
Disorder, which can feel like someone is physically removed from their body or the place
You already
they are
said
in.
that.
All of the above can be coping mechanisms. That's all they have in common.
And maybe making light of some of these issues could be a coping mechanism, you asshole.
And if you want to read more about dissociative disorder, I have sources in the description.
I have sources, okay? I'm not gonna list any of them in my little 15-minute video. I'm just gonna keep talking shit. Pointing at the description doesn't count as mentioning it in your video. You didn't actually go through any of the information.
And one of them is about dissociation that I highly recommend you look at. So that's the thing. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than a shallow definition of a mental illness. Diagnosing you will take more than 6—
Just like how it's so much more of a YouTuber than just a shallow little reaction that you're giving to their little 15... You see the projection? It's all that they know how to do. I know that I don't like to look into things extensively until I personally feel like it, so I guess she's not being extensive on this subject because she doesn't feel like it. I'm totally making sense right now.
60 seconds of spouting symptoms or relatable situations at you. Your mental illness takes more than 15 seconds to diagnose you.
Oh my god, like she's seriously well actuallying this bitch on mental illness. Like she's dissociative-splaining to someone with DID who is dedicated to educating people on DID because she went off of a 30-second video.
60 seconds of spouting symptoms or relatable situations at you. Your mental illness takes more than 15 seconds to diagnose you.
So it's like, then why only spend 15 minutes on it? Again, you just devalued everything that DissociaDID has been working towards for years on YouTube. Like, you didn't even check out how legitimate she is, but you want to talk about doing research. On the subject of accusing people of faking, I have a lot to say about it, but it's so much that it's another video for another day. But just keep in mind that when you criticize people for faking, their content is representative of real people. So whatever you accuse them of to call them out as a faker then gets used against people who actually have those disorders. And that's why you have to be very careful of what you say about people who you believe are faking and have correct information to back up your assertions. Otherwise, you're doing more harm than good by quote-unquote calling out fakers who might not even be faking. That's all I'll say on that. But moving on. Okay, we need to double back here because there's just a few things terribly wrong with what she just said. So for one, she doesn't show any clips of what she's claiming to have seen, aside from a video that was a joke and wasn't meant to be educational in the first place. Aside from that, she's just showing this therapist. Like, what? Secondly, she lists 3 things. She said maladaptive daydreaming, non-maladaptive daydreaming, and dissociation are all coping mechanisms, and that's all that they have in common.
In short, the difference between dissociation and daydreaming is that normal, non-maladaptive daydreaming is a completely normal form of dissociation that most people go through. Dissociation beyond that can be maladaptive daydreaming and dissociation disorder, which can feel like someone is physically removed from their body or the place they are in. All of the above can be coping mechanisms. That's all they have in common.
But that's not true. So, first of all, she should have defined what maladaptive daydreaming is because you're trying to educate people, right? People don't typically use the word maladaptive in a sentence. It's not a word in most people's immediate vocabulary, so there's a good chance that people don't know what that means. Mal means bad. Adapt means adaptive too. So that's what she means when she says non-maladaptive daydreaming, which is not bad daydreaming. It's not meant to adapt to a situation. It's not connected to trauma. It's just the type of daydreaming that most people do. And that's what she meant when she said it's a form of dissociation that most people go through. And all that's fine. The problem comes in when she says
all of the above can be coping mechanisms. That's all they have in common.
And she said all of the above, which typically means more than 2, which means that she was including non-maladaptive, maladaptive, and dissociation as the 3 things that don't have anything in common other than them being coping mechanisms. She said that's all that they have in common. But when you look here, it says maladaptive daydreaming is when you spend a large amount of time daydreaming. This behavior tends to be a way for people to live with mental health conditions like anxiety. Maladaptive means that this form of daydreaming can be a harmful way to deal with a problem. It can get in the way of your work, relationships, and hobbies. Experts aren't sure exactly how many people do this, but one study in Israel found that 2.5% of adults and a little over 4% of younger adults who are students in the country had maladaptive daydreaming. The important thing is that underneath that it says who is at risk for maladaptive daydreaming. And it says here, people with ADHD, dissociative disorders, and then it goes on to say anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, some forms of depression, which are all things that she was talking about in her video. But most importantly, dissociative disorders. So when you say that people who maladaptive daydream and people who have dissociative disorders have nothing in common, they're literally at risk for a dissociative disorder if they have it. So her whole point was to basically say, well, just because you're daydreaming doesn't mean you have dissociation disorder. You could just be maladaptive daydreaming. But that means you could have dissociation disorder. So you're misinforming people when you say that, while you're trying to say that people are misinforming mental health conditions on TikTok. And this is a woman who has sources, by the way.
And if you want to read more about dissociative disorder, I have sources in the description, and one of them is about dissociation that I highly recommend you look at.
So you showed sources to get it wrong and prove yourself wrong, I guess. Like what?
It's so much more than that. It's so much more than a shallow definition of a mental illness. Diagnosing you will take more than 60 seconds of spouting symptoms or relatable situations at you. Your mental illness takes more than 15 seconds to diagnose you.
I got diagnosed with ADHD at 17, so...
You guys, I almost missed this while editing this video, but if you pay attention, this person just said, I got diagnosed at 17 with ADHD. So that means that this is someone who uses TikTok and actually got a professional diagnosis. So this is further proof that, like I've been saying, people on TikTok are not diagnosing themselves on TikTok. They look at the information, they see professionals, and get a professional diagnosis. But she uses the clip herself and she doesn't even get it. Like, it's blowing my mind. I almost missed it because to me it's common sense. But then I realized, oh shit, she didn't even realize it. Oh my god, like this video, again, it's so irresponsible. Like, am I the only one who remembers when there was a time where women were accused of and thought to believe that they had hysteria? Like, I don't know why everyone's acting like it's a brand new thing that people mistakenly believe they have a disorder that they don't have. This has happened all throughout history. Even on YouTube, people were constantly saying that they had depression and anxiety like 5 years ago or something. Maybe 6. Like, it blows my mind that people think this is just a TikTok problem. This is a human problem. As long as you keep putting the blame on TikTok, you will never solve the real issue. You should be asking yourself, why are there so many women specifically who believe that they have disorders that they don't have? And accusing them all of just diagnosing themselves on TikTok when they say they have an illness ignores the fact that there are plenty of people who are actually seeking a diagnosis, like the person who she just showed in her own video, that contradicts her claim of people not seeing a professional. The point that I'm making is this is very complicated and we need to get to the core root cause of the problem and find a solution that can carry on beyond TikTok. Because this has happened in other points of history and has happened on other apps as well. There are plenty of people who believe that they were depressed or manic on Tumblr. That was like a big thing. It's just so much more complicated than what she's making it seem. And again, like I said before, she's conflating someone faking an illness, someone mistakenly believing that they have an illness, someone having a learning disability, which can make it hard for them to understand how to seek out a proper diagnosis, and someone being told that they have an illness that they don't have. Those are all completely different things. To put them all together and title your video Faking Illness for TikTok Clout is wildly irresponsible, and no one's criticizing her for that. How are we right now in a place on YouTube where there are countless YouTubers going around fake claiming people by proxy when they have no educational background basis or any sort of authority to do so? How are you going to use the very logic that you're criticizing to attack people while telling them that they simply can't mistakenly tell someone that they may have an illness that they don't have? It's, for the most part, harmless, where what you're doing is meant to cause harm. You're trying to shame people and ridicule them and embarrass them for a mistake. For the most part, it's a mistake. There aren't that many people actually purposefully trying to make people believe things that they don't. It's a loud minority, and you're using this loud minority circumstance to attack the majority. This whole thing started over people trying to find solutions for the mental issues that they were struggling with while dealing with society pressuring them to hide their symptoms or else they would be seen as crazy, which then resulted in people, for many reasons, looking too deeply into the subjects in the wrong way and believing that they have issues that they don't, which led them to believe that they were more mentally ill than they were and has made it harder for them to get the help that they need for the issues that they actually have. And to combat that, you now want to shame people and perpetuate a dynamic where people accuse others of faking if they show any of their symptoms. That's pretty much what you're doing. If you show symptoms, if you talk about symptoms, if you bring it up in any way, shape, or form, you're faking. Unless you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have something that we can't do a blood test for and we can't visibly see. And even for the symptoms that we can visibly see, not everyone does it the same way. So if you don't do it in the way that I deem to be legitimate, you're faking. You've turned a system that started with people being ashamed for being themselves and attacked it to shame people for being themselves. And somehow you think that you're the good person here. You see yourself as the crusader trying to combat toxic behavior. It's just wild. And it's going to get a lot worse than this if this shit continues.
I got diagnosed with ADHD at 17, so men are 3 times more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD than women are. Symptoms in women include, in case you didn't know, verbal aggression such as teasing, taunting, or name-calling, low self-esteem, feeling anxious or overwhelmed in stores or large businesses, running at a time and being stressed out about money, shutting down in the middle of the day and needing to take a break from people, spending a lot of your time looking for lost things or catching up on lost work you haven't done in a while, gestures that keep you moving such as biting your lips or wringing your hands. I do this a lot. Having absolutely no energy. This is a sign of ADHD in women. No energy. Feeling like you're always at one end of a deregulated activity spectrum, meaning you're either on the couch all the time or you're doing activities all the time or you're switching back and forth rapidly. Feeling like you have good or better ideas than other people, but you don't know how to organize your thoughts, so you don't share them. And another one is feeling like you're always coping for something. When Googling why women get less diagnosed than men, what pops up is that they don't show typical symptoms, meaning they're not symptoms shown by men. The more you know.
Hey, guess what else fatigue is a symptom of? Literally everything. PMS, thyroid issues, lack of sleep, being overweight, emotional stress, boredom, grief, depression, anxiety, sleep apnea, dehydration, iron deficiency, etc. These are literally generic symptoms that don't necessarily mean you have X illness. Most of these symptoms of ADHD that this person listed are absolutely correct, and you may have all of them, some of them, or none of them, and still have ADHD. Because like I said earlier, these things manifest themselves in so many different ways, which is all the more reason why you need to get checked out by a professional and not rely on TikTok and suddenly be like, oh, I learned I have X mental illness today. No, stop.
Okay, here's the part that's fucking pissing me off. Alright, so because we got through a significant amount of her video, now I gotta double back to some shit that she fucking said in part 1 that makes absolutely no sense at this point because there's just holes all over it.
And this also applies to many other disorders that I see talked about online that just end up becoming this gross generalization of the actual illness. What I don't see talked about with ADHD is how it can cause fatigue, hyperfocusing, I bet you didn't know that one, forgetfulness, sudden mood swings, restlessness, anxiety, lack of motivation, substance misuse, and other symptoms that aren't so LOL stereotypical.
Yeah, you want to know why you don't see people talking about those symptoms? Because when they do, then here you come. And you call them generic symptoms and shame them for listing it in their TikToks.
This is a sign of ADHD in women. No energy. The more you know.
Hey, guess what else fatigue is a symptom of? Literally everything.
So she talked about fatigue, and then you said that she shouldn't talk about it because it's in all these other issues, when you just said earlier that you don't see anyone talking about fatigue. Oh my fucking god.
What I don't see talked about with ADHD is how it can cause fatigue.
The worst part is, everything that she listed are specifics, not generalizations. Not this list or this one. They're specifics. And they can be specific to the disorders that people are listing them under, because for that disorder, those are specific symptoms that coincide with it. So remember how she said,
what I don't see talked about with ADHD is how it can cause fatigue, hyperfocusing, I bet you didn't know that one, forgetfulness, and other symptoms that aren't so LOL stereotypical.
So on this list, it says forgetfulness, but she calls these generic symptoms. And right here, yes, it's misspelled. People make typing errors all the time, but it says forgetfulness. You called it generic and then said, I don't see anyone talking about, but it's right there in front of you. It says temper tantrums here, and she was talking about mood swings, which sometimes a temper tantrum can be because you have mood swings. It's not, you know, it depends on how you define it or what context you use it in. It says right here, of those with tantrums and irritability, 21.6% had severe mood dysregulation. Taken together, these data suggest that not all children with severe tantrums are considered irritable, and that not all children with both tantrums and irritability will meet criteria for a DMDD diagnosis. And then it says here, DMDD has so much in common with both oppositional defiant disorder, ODD, and ADHD that it's sometimes hard to tell these three conditions apart. Some 90% of children with DMDD meet the criteria for ADHD, and about 80% meet the criteria for ODD. DMDD, ODD, and ADHD all cause irritable behavior and temper outbursts. The difference is the rate and intensity these behaviors are less frequent and severe with children with ODD and ADHD. So, Kurena, what are you talking about? What does all this mean? When we're talking about temper tantrums, I'm saying that temper tantrums can be a form of sudden mood swings. And in her little list here, she was saying sudden mood swings are important, not so LOL stereotypical symptoms, right? But she mocked the other TikTok that said temper tantrums was a symptom of ADHD, and she said those were generic symptoms. I'm saying temper tantrums and sudden mood swings are under the same category. So how are you going to mock something that you put on your own list? Even if you somehow want to actually me and say the sudden mood swings and temper tantrums are two different things, which they're not. They're not exactly the same, but they're definitely connected. It says right here that 21.6% of people who have tantrums and irritability had severe mood dysregulation. And it's very likely that those people can have DMDD. So that means that since this one says some 90% of children with DMDD meet the criteria of ADHD, that 90% of this 21.6% can meet the criteria of ADHD. That means it goes beyond being a generic symptom and not serious and, oh, it coincides with all these other disorders. 21.6% is about a fifth of 100%. So that's like 1 out of 5 people. That's a pretty big number. And then 90% of those people meet the criteria of ADHD. So even if you want to say, oh, well, sudden mood swings and temper tantrums are 2 different things, temper tantrums should also be on this list because it's a legitimate symptom of ADHD and was in that TikTok, along with forgetfulness, which she verbatim put that on her list and it was in the TikTok. And you remember how it said that DMDD, ODD, and ADHD can be mixed up and confused together? The thing that separates them all are those other quote-unquote generic symptoms that she was referring to. If you map out all of the symptoms and you see somebody more coinciding with symptoms under one disorder over another, it's then more likely that they have that disorder over the other one. Because again, as it says here, 90% of children with DMDD meet the criteria of ADHD, and about 80% meet the criteria of ODD. So their separate symptoms are the things that would sway you more towards believing that they have one over the other. But when people try to get into those nuances and say, hey, you know, these are a bunch of list of symptoms that go under this disorder, now she shits all over and say they aren't important, even though the 8 symptoms that she lists have been listed by 2 of the TikToks that she was showing in her own video. Now, I'm not about to do this with every single symptom on her stupid ass list. I could, but then the video would be 1,000 years long, and it's long enough already. But keep in mind what I did here, and that this sort of breakdown is what I'm referring to when I say depending on the context that you use these words in, they can also be considered significant symptoms and not just generic symptoms in association with ADHD. It's all about your interpretation of it, and she took the most generic and dismissive interpretation possible. Like, I really hope that she doesn't have a medical degree, because if she does, it's going to waste. She said restlessness. People can show fidgeting as that. It depends on, again, the context that you're using it in. And then remember this list, because now if you go over to this TikTok that she showed,
men are 3 times more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD than women are. Symptoms in women include, in case you didn't know, verbal aggression such as teasing, taunting, or name-calling, low self-esteem, feeling anxious or overwhelmed in stores or large businesses,
talking about being anxious when she was talking about anxiety,
running out of time and being stressed out about money, shutting down in the middle of the day and needing to take a break from people.
You can consider that to be a form of fatigue or a lack of motivation, depending on the context.
Spending a lot of your time looking for lost things or catching up on lost work you haven't done in a while.
Lost things and lost work can be considered forgetfulness.
Gestures that keep you moving, such as biting your lips or wringing your hands. I do this a lot.
That can be considered fidgeting or restlessness.
Having absolutely no energy. This is a sign of ADHD in women. No energy.
Again, that can be considered fatigue or a lack of motivation.
Feeling like you're always at one end of a deregulated activity spectrum, meaning you're either on the couch all the time or you're doing activities all the time or you're switching back and forth rapidly.
Which can not only be considered restlessness, but depending on the reason why you're switching back and forth, you can consider that to be anxiety or mood swings.
Feeling like you have good or better ideas than other people, but you don't know how to organize your thoughts, so you don't share them. And another one is feeling like you're always coping for something.
And hyperfocusing can be a way of coping. It says here, the brains of people with ADHD are drawn to activities that give instant feedback. It says, in the view of Larry Silver, MD, a psychiatrist at Georgetown University Medical School in Washington, D.C., such intense concentration is actually a coping mechanism. It's a way of dealing with distraction. Silver says, college kids with ADHD tell me they intentionally go into a state of intense focus to get work done. Younger kids do the same thing unconsciously when they're doing something pleasurable, like watching a movie or playing a computer game. Often they aren't even aware that they're focusing so intensely. So it's all on her list, and the and more is the rest of that woman's TikTok. Now here's the most important thing of this list of symptoms. When it comes to women and their symptoms for ADHD and autism specifically, as well as many other disorders, they're not taken seriously. They're dismissed by their doctors and their psychiatrists, so then they continue to have those problems unchecked and untreated. Look at this. So it says here that historically, ADHD has almost exclusively focused on hyperactive little boys, and only in the past 6 or 7 years has any research focused on adult ADHD. And it says specifically here that the reason why there hasn't been much focus on girls and women is due to current diagnostic criteria, which remain more appropriate for males than females, and to parent and teacher referral patterns spurred by the more obvious and more problematic male ADHD behaviors. Some deny that the disorder exists in females or in anyone at all, but specifically females. So it says here that women aren't recognized because of the current diagnostic criteria, which is mostly for males. And the referral patterns are spurred by the more obvious and more problematic male ADHD behaviors. And so, in summary, some theories is that females with ADHD are neglected by researchers because hyperactivity is usually missing in girls. And to that TikToker's point, it's not that it's missing, but it shows up differently in women than it does in men. And it says girls with undiagnosed ADHD will most likely carry their problems into adulthood, and left untreated, their lives often fall apart. And that's why this is so important. It says girls with untreated ADHD are at risk for chronic low self-esteem, underachievement, anxiety, depression, teen pregnancy, early smoking during middle school and high school. And she put anxiety on her list along with substance abuse because it mentions drinking and smoking, of important things that she doesn't see people talking about, which that woman talked about, but that further explains why it's so important that women talk about this stuff, because this leads to serious effects in both their physical health and their mental health when they grow up. It says as adults, they're at risk for divorce, financial crisis, single parenting a child with ADHD, never completing college, underemployment, substance abuse, eating disorders, and constant stress due to difficulty in managing the demands of daily life, which overflow into the difficulties of their children, 50% of whom are likely to have ADHD as well. Here's the thing, that's not only due to genetics, but there's also other research about how pregnant women, depending on the mood that they have, can greatly affect the mood of their child. That's a whole separate story. The point is, this being untreated in women is causing severe physical and mental health effects for women. And women aren't taken seriously when they talk about their ADHD because of people like you, Gabi. That woman's TikTok, ironically, is more important than your 15-minute video, contrary to your point, because she's giving real life examples of the things that are on your fucking list. The people who you're giving this list off to can't relate to the words that you're using, the women, but they can relate to the words that that TikToker is using and then know how to explain their disorder to a professional. And women need to explain it in the words that they're feeling so that experts can document it. The words that you were listing, Gabi, are the words that are used to describe men's experience, which is why it's overlooked in women. Again, missing the entire point. What you're doing is creating stigma around mental health. If someone's watching and agreeing with this girl, and then they come across your video, as you say, well, you're wrong. What if the doctor diagnosed them with those symptoms and said that it took so long because most men don't display those symptoms? Because this woman is talking about this because she also has these issues.
Gestures that keep you moving, such as biting your lips or wringing your hands. I do this a lot.
So whether you realize it or not, you're not only making people not believe her, but you're saying that anyone who sees her and identifies with her, they don't believe them either. Just because it's not true for you doesn't mean it isn't true for other people, but you're shitting on everyone who's watching. When she said most women aren't diagnosed because they're not symptoms shown by men, she didn't just make that up. She's trying to inform people and you dismiss the entire thing because she didn't do it exactly the way that you want her to. Well, where the fuck are your videos about ADHD? Why didn't you link any of them? But you're going to attack everyone else for trying to make a difference, and well, actually them on shit that you know nothing about.
I got diagnosed with ADHD at 17, so men are 3 times more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD than women are. Symptoms in women include, in case you didn't know, verbal aggression such as teasing, taunting, or name-calling, low self-esteem, feeling anxious or overwhelmed in stores or large businesses, running at a time and being stressed out about money, shutting down in the middle of the day and needing to take a break from people, spending a lot of your time looking for lost things or catching up on lost work you haven't done in a while, gestures that keep you moving such as biting your lips or wringing your hands. I do this a lot. Having absolutely no energy. This is a sign of ADHD in women. No energy. Feeling like you're always at one end of a deregulated activity spectrum, meaning you're either on the couch all the time or you're doing activities all the time or you're switching back and forth rapidly. Feeling like you have good or better ideas than other people, but you don't know how to organize your thoughts, so you don't share them. And another one is feeling like you're always coping for something. When Googling why women get less diagnosed than men, what pops up is that they don't show typical symptoms, meaning they're not symptoms shown by men. The more you know.
Hey, guess what else fatigue is a symptom of? Literally everything. PMS, thyroid issues, lack of sleep.
That's why you look at all the fucking symptoms. I love how this person just listed a bunch of symptoms that the whole time I was watching a TikTok, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm struggling with. Oh, that makes sense. Again, but here she's just like, this can go under all these other things, right? You're supposed to look at several symptoms for you to think that you have the issue and then go see a professional about it. She literally said that she got diagnosed. And the whole point of her TikTok is to explain why women are not diagnosed. Let me show you this subject that's completely different from what I'm talking about to tell you why someone's misinforming on the mental disorder that they're bringing up. Well, if the whole point of the video is to explain why the mental disorder is misdiagnosed, I don't think I should be looking at that video to understand the diagnosis itself. I should maybe go look at their TikTok and look for other TikToks talking about the actual diagnosis. But since you don't know how to fucking do research, of course that's all you take away from it. And you miss the entire fucking point. Now, of course, you can say, well, I have ADHD, so do I, and I still got the fucking point. It's not an excuse. You had to edit this shit and put it up. You have a problem. She's upset, she's swearing, but people are going to get on me for my tone and be like, oh my God, why are you talking to her like that? I'm sorry that I'm not devious enough to manipulate my audience with happy piano music, as I have an attitude towards people who are mentally ill, people who are trying to normalize mental illness, people who are trying to overcome the trauma of their mental illness by making light of it, and so on and so forth. I apologize for the fact that I am so enraged at this woman for doing the very thing that she's criticizing people for due to her own lack of research, as she criticizes people for having lack of research and lack of understanding for these things. I'm sorry that I am being so irresponsible to point out how infuriating her irresponsible behavior is, because my attitude's the problem, apparently, not what she's doing. It's a problem when you call out people's bad behavior, not the bad behavior itself. And some people don't get it. Some people don't get why I'm saying her behavior is so awful. Like, what she's doing is dehumanizing these people. When you label these people as TikTokers, you dehumanize them, because people keep forgetting that these are just human beings on social media sharing an opinion. It's not a TikTok problem. What she's doing is worse than what the rest of them have done, because she knows better. Her whole video is about research and doing better and taking more time to understand these things, and she's done the exact opposite of that with these people's situations. At no point did it register in her head that maybe there's some sort of correlation. Maybe there's an underlying problem that's leading up to this epidemic of people misdiagnosing themselves. I wonder what that is. She's not critically thinking on anything. And the worst part is that woman was trying to tell her what the problem was. She just explained how a lot of girls don't get diagnosed with ADHD because it gets misunderstood for them being quirky or just like girly or whatever. So there's a lot of girls who are undiagnosed with learning disabilities and other learning issues where they're not being treated for it. So then they go on TikTok and don't understand how to seek a diagnosis, and they believe that they have disorders that they don't have. It's literally right in front of her, and she doesn't get it because she's already labeled them as bad and is on a warpath against these people. And you got to remember what she said before. Let me address a point that she made earlier now that you have more context of how horrible she's been.
Community that makes everyone feel loved, accepted, and valid as everyone deserves to feel. But I feel like that almost plays into the subconscious want to have a mental illness to fit in. Like, what social currency is gained by putting your chosen mental illness in your Twitter bio?
Well, with Tourette's, for example, it can help people to find other people with tics like your own. It's kind of crucial for people with coprolalia because those tics are embarrassing and only 10% of people with Tourette's have it. Saying offensive things can make you feel as if you're crazy, so finding others who do the same would give you some peace. Someone with another disorder or even a mental illness could need community for the same reasons. You have to remember that people are being neglected by their parents and have no support system. But that's why she said chosen mental illness, because she will continue to insinuate that these people are faking and not that they are suffering and looking for someone who understands and accepts them. These people are suffering and have mental illnesses and learning disabilities to be doing this in the first place. And the reason why she does this is because it makes it easy to ridicule and chastise people in this demeaning tone that she has throughout the entire video when you label them as a faker, because you're labeling them as doing something bad. They're a bad person, so I get to talk to them as if they're bad. I get to scold them because they're bad. But again, you're scolding people with learning disabilities. And that's why it's so offensive, because the road to hell is paved with justification, and she justifies scolding and attacking people with learning disabilities and people with mental illnesses, people who are mentally unwell, by labeling them as someone who's doing bad. And these people can't defend themselves because she's an influencer and they're just regular people, and a lot of them are children. So she's just as bad as everyone else I've showed you in this series, if not worse, because she's got the pleasant piano music and people actually think that they should be taking her seriously. When you label someone as attention-seeking or just wanting a mental illness, you then disregard whatever they're going through. That's why I'm mad. And so it's really a problem.
And another one is feeling like you're always coping for something. When Googling why women get less diagnosed than men, what pops up is that they don't show typical symptoms, meaning they're not symptoms shown by men. The more you know.
Hey, guess what else fatigue is a symptom of? Literally everything. PMS, thyroid issues, lack of sleep, being overweight, emotional stress, boredom,
Completely
grief,
unrelated.
depression, anxiety, sleep apnea, dehydration,
Okay, but they
iron
don't include all the other fucking symptoms she brought up, dude.
deficiency, etc. These are literally generic symptoms that don't necessarily mean you have X
So what
illness.
you're telling me is if I go to a psychologist and I talk to him about my issues, should I sit there as they give me the ADHD diagnosis and say, well, what made you think that I have ADHD? And as they go through the symptoms, I should say, oh, you talked about fatigue? That could mean that I have all these other issues. I could just have PMS. Why don't you think I just have PMS? Like, that sounds fucking crazy. They go to another symptom. I'm like, well, you know, people with chronic depression have that symptom. Sometimes they just sit on the couch. So how do you know I have ADHD? Because they looked at several fucking symptoms to come to that conclusion.
Most of these symptoms of ADHD that this person listed are absolutely correct, and you may have all of them, some of them, or none of them, and still have ADHD. Because like I said earlier, these things manifest themselves.
And it's not her fault if people don't do the proper fucking research, which is why you should be promoting that people do their proper research and understand what it means to look at symptoms. Because a lot of kids don't understand that when looking at symptoms, you need to look at them all. And if you have most of them or more than half, then you should be concerned and then see a professional to be sure. That's what you should be talking, and that's what you should cut off the piano music and say that and end your fucking video. Well, why do you say that, Kurena? Why do you say that that's how people should look at symptoms and question if they should go and see a professional? Didn't she just say you may have all of them, some of them, or none of them, and still may or may not have this problem? Well, every single commercial for any sort of medication lists off a bunch of symptoms to you and tells you to do the same thing. That's where I'm getting that from. The fucking medical industry telling you to talk to your doctor if you're experiencing XYZ symptoms to see if you have this issue and need this pill. That's what you're supposed to do. So even though, yes, she said, oh, you may have all of them, some of them, or none of them, well, you're supposed to be concerned if you have a good amount of those symptoms, around half or more, and then go and consult a professional. That's what the professionals tell you to do. So that's where I'm getting it from.
In so many different ways, which is all the more reason why you need to get checked out by a professional and not rely on TikTok and suddenly be like, oh, I learned I have X mental illness today. No, stop.
So I should just go to YouTube then. You know, they can't explain it in 30 seconds, but you can fucking explain what I need to know in 15 minutes on YouTube. What makes your video any more legitimate than theirs? Well, I linked all the shit that people need to know in the description. Then why am I fucking here looking at you? Like, what? You make no sense, lady. Even though at the beginning you said that stuff could be helpful, you're taking a shit on it and you're not providing any adequate information. Fuck.
It's not that these people don't have the mental illness they're talking about in their TikToks. It's just impossible to tell all in a 60-second video.
Just like with your 15-minute video. But you want people to take you seriously, don't you? Also, by the way, she's misrepresenting TikTok. People make TikToks for a minute. And it can go up to 3 and I think even 5 minutes, maybe even 10. I don't know about the 10-minute mark. But the more you make TikToks, the longer your videos can get. The video I'm gonna show you when this is over that helped me with my ADHD severely went for a minute. And in that minute, you'll see just how much fucking, maybe a minute, a few seconds, but you'll see just how much information I got from that.
It's okay to enjoy these or even learn something new.
You made it sound like it's not okay because you just shat all over DissociaDID. All she did was make a little joke and you're like, well, that's not informing blah, 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 and it's blah, 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 blah. But now you want to sit here and walk back from what you just said and say, oh, it's okay because you're going through cognitive dissonance right now and you've pretty much fallen completely into doublethink, I think. Like, holy fuck. That's her choice. Instead of understanding the nuance, she said, I'll just argue both at the same time.
Do not diagnose yourself from them. Do more research about the mental illness because you do know yourself best, and see a licensed therapist and or doctor or psychiatrist or someone qualified.
You do realize that a lot of these TikTokers say the same thing, right?
And not someone on TikTok to help.
You want to know what else is funny? She says don't look at TikTok, but she showed a therapist on TikTok and agreed with the therapist on TikTok. Why would you even show that to back your ass up when you just said not to do? Oh my god. I hate this.
Diagnose you and get help because
How is the video with the like pleasant piano music like the worst one I've seen?
Someone qualified and not someone on TikTok to help diagnose you and get help because you are so much more nuanced than a list of generic symptoms on a video. And in this video, I'm not saying to stop overreacting over minor or generic symptoms because other people have it way worse and they're the ones that actually have the mental illness. No, I'm just saying that TikTok is not the place for you to diagnose yourself.
What she also doesn't understand is that people aren't using TikTok to diagnose themselves. People look at TikTok and then they'll go do research on Google. So I'm just sick of people putting TikTok at the forefront of this. They're trying so hard to take TikTok down. It's pathetic. I'm not watching these fucking ads. I don't care. So let me show you the video that actually helped me. So I saw this video on TikTok. I heard the audio of it and someone was reacting to it just with like facial expressions like, oh my God, you know, but they weren't saying anything so that we could listen. And just in the first minute, that was enough to blow my mind on what I had been struggling with my entire life. And so this is a very old video. I don't know enough about this guy other than a 2-hour lecture that I saw of his and another hour lecture after watching this 13-minute clip. So even if anything about him is not legit, he does have a PhD, and this genuinely helped me.
So I want you to understand that you have a brain. The back part of it is where you learn. The front part is where you do. Knowledge, performance, knowing, doing. And ADHD splits them apart. I don't care what you know, you won't use it. You can be the brightest kid in the world, not going to matter. So you got a real problem on your hands because you can know stuff and you won't do stuff. That's a serious problem called a performance disorder. So what we know about ADHD is it's going to put all 5 of those levels at risk because it interferes with all 7 executive functions, and you're going to have time blindness, and you won't be able to aim your behavior toward the future, to care for yourself as effectively as other people are able to do. You have intention deficit disorder. You have a disorder of performance, not knowledge. You know what to do, but can't do it. You have a disorder of the when and the where, not the what and the how. Your problem is not with knowing what to do. It's with doing what you know.
So that was the entire TikTok. That was 56 seconds. You remember how she said, you can't explain somebody blah, 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 blah. It's not helpful, blah, 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 blah. That was so much information in such a short amount of time. And as someone who gives lectures, I'm sure that he knows you have to grasp someone's attention quickly with certain things to keep their attention for the rest of the lecture. Some people don't know how to give lectures, and especially when talking about ADHD, you want to do it in a way that can help those people to pay attention. And even in the comments, I had saw some people saying he talked about it in this way where I was able to actually pay attention, and I have ADHD. And obviously the same goes for me. I didn't miss a word. So I actually looked up this whole video and listened to it because it was so helpful.
You have a disorder of the when and the where, not the what and the how. Your problem is not with knowing what to do. It's with doing what you know. What does that mean? It means that all interventions must be out at that place in the environment where you're not doing what you know, to help you show what you know. I have to create scaffolding around you to help you do this. What does this mean for treatment? Teaching skills is inadequate. It won't work. You can sit down with somebody with ADHD and tell them what they need to do. Good luck, right? It's not even going to leave your office. You act like they're stupid. They're not. They know what to do. They know what you're telling them to do, right? They're not going to do it. When they get out there, that information has no controlling value over their life, and it ticks you off. You start to interpret it as a motivational problem. But the only way to deal with executive deficits is to re-engineer the environment around them to help them show what they know. And all treatments must be out there in their life where you have to build that scaffolding. So what have you learned today? ADHD is not an attention disorder, that it's an executive disorder, that the executive system is a very complex multi-level system like driving. It is not one level of cognition, and that's all it is. It's complex, and it extends into our daily life. You know that ADHD disrupts that system through behavioral inhibition and wiping out all the other executive abilities, which puts you at risk for failing in your executive activities in your daily life. People with ADHD have problems in all dimensions of executive functioning in their daily life. To have great difficulty in getting along with other people, building up friendships, networks, cooperatives, subordinating their interests to others, all the things in life that involve executive functioning, from money management to driving to friendships to families and so on, are at grave risk in this disorder because they all depend on this executive system. So we are going to have to help people with ADHD build the scaffolding around them and use the medication as neurogenetic therapy with them in order to compensate for these executive deficits. We're going to have to design prosthetic environments around them. You know, the beauty of ADHD is it's the most treatable disorder in psychiatry. There is no disorder that we treat that has as many medications and as many psychosocial treatments that are as effective as these are for as many people, producing more change than any other medications and psychosocial treatments for these individuals. Do you know that 55% of people on medication are normalized? 90% of them respond? Do you know that the effects of ADHD medications are 3 times that of anxiety drugs and antidepressants that you all give away like candy in your practice? We have huge effective drugs on our hands here that we can use. And we also have very effective psychosocial interventions. This is the most treatable disorder that we face. The biggest problem is most people don't get treatment. 40% of children and 90% of adults with ADHD are not recognized or treated for their disorder. That's the problem. Not that we're over-treating, we are under-treating. And we're under-treating the most treatable disorder in psychiatry. Thank you.
So I've been taking some of the advice from his video and some things that I was already trying out. This video gave me motivation to continue to try those things to help me pay attention to stuff, because hearing it from him lets me know that it's legit. But the ideas that I got before watching his video, the ones that I was already doing, I got from TikTok. They said, try this, try that. This will help with ADHD. Try this, try that. And again, I'm someone who's been seeing therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, and none of them gave me those tips. They just listen to me talk. And it's probably because other than 2 of all the people I was just listing that I saw, no one else even brought up the ADHD. And again, it's because many women are not diagnosed with it easily. The only reason why I was diagnosed with ADHD is because I already said I think I have it. So then they knew to look for it as I was talking. But if I hadn't said anything, they would have commonly mistaken a lot of quirky things that women do as just me being a quirky girl and not having ADHD. So all the stuff that she was saying about that is wrong. But the point is, I would have never found this video, even though it's 8 years old, if I hadn't been on TikTok. I never heard of him before. So I'm so grateful to TikTok for that. And TikTok has so much helpful information because experts and non-experts are on there. The truth is, some humans are fucking annoying and they're on social media. What I tell people, don't watch, like what she's doing and what all these people are doing is the equivalent of me getting on this fucking video right now and saying, don't look at YouTube for people to point out bullshit to you. Don't look at YouTube for people to give you alternative perspectives because they don't know what they're talking about. When I'm literally trying to do that right now. No, the truth is, even someone with good perspectives can give you bad information sometimes. And then there's people who just commonly give you bad information because their perspective in general is bad. Like all these people who regularly project or are suffering from dealing with some form of cognitive dissonance. And listen to what she said. She did this all throughout the video.
It's been brought to my attention that this girl does have dissociation disorder, and that's not my point here. Whether she does or not is none of my business. It's personal. It would be really ignorant and stupid of me to sit here and say that someone else is faking something for attention.
But it's your business with everyone else because of everything you keep saying.
That might subconsciously insert itself into your mind and your life as a placebo and make your symptoms worse. A placebo is basically thinking your way into symptoms of something that you don't have.
You keep saying things like chosen mental illness.
Like, what social currency is gained by putting your chosen mental illness in your Twitter bio? Diluting the issues that people with actual mental illness go through, but how that dilutes the problem that people who actually suffer face.
And you titled your video using mental illness for TikTok clout. And you said people label themselves mentally ill for social currency to fit in.
But I feel like that almost plays into the subconscious want to have a mental illness to fit in. Like, what social currency is gained by putting your chosen mental illness in your Twitter bio? Just like that example of someone who actually suffers from OCD, feeling like their problems are now diluted because Becky is talking about her OCD because she wants the markers aligned a certain way.
Even though you have no proof for it. You don't know their intentions. You're just asserting it. You're creating straw man arguments, which further influences people to believe that it's okay to label someone a faker if they just feel like it. As if that's not something we should be cautious of. You should be cautious whenever you are trivializing someone else's experience with their mental health. Because if that person is actually suffering from some sort of mental illness and you shoot them down, how is that helping? Especially because we're talking about kids and young adults here. very vulnerable people. The only reason why you're saying that it's none of your business when it comes to DissociaDID is because now you think she isn't faking. If you thought she was faking, you would continue to say that shit because you said it with everyone else. So they're not faking it, but they are faking it. You're not saying that they're faking it, but you keep saying that they're faking it. Like what? Oh, well, I'm saying this because kids can be convinced that they have things that they don't have. Well, kids can't be indoctrinated into believing anything if they have the tools to know better. And your video is not doing that. Like the shit that she's done here, if she were a therapist, she would be the type of therapist who doesn't diagnose her patient properly because she'd say, I didn't see them talk about all these other things.
What I don't see talked about with ADHD is how it can cause fatigue.
Even though the patient is describing the very symptoms that she should be checking off.
This is a sign of ADHD in women. No energy. The more you know.
Hey, guess what else fatigue is a symptom of? Literally everything.
And so it would take her patient 17 years to get diagnosed. So it's not, that's just not how you inform people. Let's see if I have any more videos to show you. I really just couldn't take it anymore. That was pretty much it. I have nothing more to say. I'm just going to move on to the next video in the series. So we're basically moving straight to part 7. I might do like 2 Kurena's replies before I put up part 7. But yeah, I'm done with this. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.